Hi, my name is Gregor Quack, and I'm a graduate curatorial intern at the Yale University Art Gallery. Today, I want to introduce you to Portrait of Nijinsky by the American artist Franz Kline, which is part of a recent gift to the gallery from the Friday Foundation. In this work from 1942, we encounter a figure dressed in a clown's costume. His oversized hat with the golden tassel droops to one side. The white brim is decorated with a bold zigzag pattern. His head rests on one side of his extravagantly floppy collar. The ruffles are pressed into a tangle of red brushstrokes. The jester's face is caked with the traditional whiteface makeup and structured with sharp black lines and wrinkles. The figure's eyes point out from the painting toward the beholder. But is he really looking at us? Franz Kline is one of the most celebrated American artists of the 20th century, but Portrait of Nijinsky looks almost nothing like the big black and white abstractions that brought him renown as a central figure of the abstract expressionist movement. The abstract expressionists were famous for moving away from recognizable subject matter and instead focusing on the flatness of the canvas and the unbridled energy of brushed, smeared, and poured paint. In the 1940s and 50s, some influential art critics championed this style, declaring it to be the first genuinely American art movement. They felt that it replaced stale European intellectualism with American optimism and virility, just in time for America's increasing geopolitical might. One example of this most recognizable part of Kline's career is the 1961 painting Ravenna. The bold black brushstrokes in this painting look as if they were thrown onto the white canvas in spontaneous spurts of energy, even though we know that Kline actually planned his paintings quite slowly and deliberately. You might think that there was a complete break between this type of abstract work and the Portrait of Nijinsky, but Kline himself might not have seen it that way. Even after he made the transition to black and white abstraction, the name Nijinsky reappears in Kline's titles, such as in this small study untitled Study for Nijinsky, which is part of the same gift. So, who is Nijinsky? What was it that fascinated Kline about this person throughout his various stylistic shifts? The basis for the painting we're talking about is a 1911 promotional photograph of Vaslav Nijinsky, a celebrated Russian ballet dancer. In the photo, he's in costume for one of his most iconic roles, the living puppet Petrushka, the protagonist of a famous ballet russe by the same name. Petrushka is a living puppet with a deeply sensitive soul. He falls tragically in love with a ballerina who is interested in someone else. When he is rejected, Petrushka foolishly threatens his rival, is defeated, and ultimately dies of a broken heart. Kline never explained exactly what drew him to this photograph, but drawn to it he was. Apart from the portrait now at the gallery, we know of at least 5 additional paintings Kline made after the same photograph. It's possible that Kline was interested in the photograph from a purely formal standpoint. Perhaps the dynamic lines of the collar and face interested him. Maybe the pattern on the hat gave him a first taste for the bold lines that will become his signature later on. It's also possible, however, that it was the subject of the photo that spoke to Kline. Some art historians have suggested that Nijinsky reminded Kline of his wife Elizabeth. Like Nijinsky, Elizabeth was a ballerina, and just like him, she suffered from schizophrenia. Perhaps painting this picture was Kline's way of honoring his wife. Another, and I think more plausible explanation, is that Kline actually saw something of himself in the character of Petrushka. Kline once wrote, quote, "I have always felt that I'm like a clown, and that my life might work out like a tragedy, a clown's tragedy. If we take him at his word, then this painting tells us about how Klein saw his own place as an artist, as melancholic and ultimately misunderstood. Such a glimpse into Klein's emotional life could even help us rethink some of the established narratives we have learned about abstract expressionism as a whole. Because, as influential as that movement's story has been, it has also been limited by its focus on a particular cliché of the artist as a hard-nosed white man. One way in which those narratives have begun to crumble is the overdue acknowledgement of the many important women abstract expressionists and artists of color that played a role in the movement. Our close look at the 1942 portrait of Nijinsky shows us that this macho narrative not only excluded important artists from art history, but that it was also never even fully true for the men at its center. This early canvas shows us that behind the painter of large, splashy abstractions was an artist who used his work to explore self-doubt, vulnerability, and hesitation. The seeming master of impulsive spontaneity was the same artist who painted the same photograph over and over again, as if to find out which part of himself he really saw in it. Behind an oeuvre that may seem to be all about confidence and raw power lurked a sense that power of all kinds can and maybe should be fleeting and fragile.